or being labeled a Toccoa man is a badge of honor worn by a select few men such as Daniel West, Rod Bain, Roy Pickle, Bill Wingate, Bert and Pat Christensen, Ralph Stafford, Rod Stroll, Robert Marsh, and Don Hubler. It meant you were there for the birth of the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, from dealing with Captain Sobel to the grueling physical training and miles-long nighttime hikes with full packs. It also meant running the 3 miles up and 3 miles down of legendary Currahee Mountain. Later, on December 1st, we also had to endure a 118-mile record-breaking march to Atlanta in winter-like conditions. Took us 75 hours and 15 minutes. Being a Toccoa man meant having an unshakable bond, built through both mental and physical duress.
I learned things in Toccoa the first week or so that have helped me all the rest of my life get through problems and things. And it does mean something to be a Toccoa man.
Now it means to me that I've got some damn fine friends in my late life.
Toccoa is where the story of the Men of Easy Company began, and it continued in Georgia at Fort Benning in December of 1942, with actual jump training for me and fellow soldiers such as Carwood Lipton, Dick Winters, Lewis Nixon, George Lavinson, Mike Ranney, and George Luz. At Benning, we officially earned our jump wings as paratroopers after making 5 qualifying training jumps from a C-47.
In parachute jumping, it's basically you have to learn to do everything right the first time, and you go over and learn it, and you repeat and repeat and repeat. So what happened to me, in my first jump, I went to the door of the plane, and my mind went completely blank, but I did everything right because I'd had this drummed into me for so long.
We jumped from a high altitude, about 2,000 feet, I think, and just stood up and hooked up, and jumped out the door, and that was it.
After more training in the United States, including tactical maneuvers and night jumps, the 506 officially became members of the 101st Airborne Division on June 1, 1943. In early September of 43, Forrest Guth, Maxwell Clark, and the other Men of Easy boarded a troop ship and left New York Harbor bound for the European War.
We went over in Her Majesty's ship Sumeria. It was pretty smelly, and the British food was terrible on that ship. We didn't like it.
And it took us about 2 weeks to get from New York to Liverpool.
The SS Samaria arrived in England on September 15th.
And out in the harbor, there were masts sticking up. American ships had been sunk. There were 8 or 10 of them. That was our first experience with that we knew we were in the wrong place.
I and the other Easy Company men, such as Ed Mauser, settled into our new home in Aldbourne, England, where we would train for the invasion of Northwest Europe. D-Day. We lost our first man in one night jump training exercise there. Rudolf Dittrich's chute didn't open, and he was killed.
We trained there for 9 months. We had practice jumps. We had a night jump there, and it looked like the area of France, but we didn't realize where we were going to go.
General Eisenhower said we was going to be 94% casualties, so we all knew that already. We probably wasn't supposed to know it, but we did.
Yank paratroopers received last-minute instructions before taking off for the invasion coast 100 miles across the English Channel.
We soldiers of the 101st and 82nd Airborne would lead the way into Normandy prior to the beach landings on June 6th. On the evening of June 5th at 11 p.m., easy men such as Ed Joint, J.B. Stokes, Dick Davenport, Wayne Skinny Sisk, Alton Moore, and Robert Rader, as well as thousands of other paratroopers, left England on nearly 1,000 C-47 transport planes. Easy Company took off from a Pottery airfield, while others left from bases in other parts of Great Britain. We headed across the English Channel, our destination, Normandy. Decades later, Don Malarkey and Earl McClung walked that same runway at Potter, England, with a feeling of deja vu.
Just that we was going to combat, what we'd been training to do.
First thing you know, we're ready to, we're over the Cotentin Peninsula and ready to jump.
Low cloud cover and intense flak by the Germans first put over the Jersey and Guernsey Islands and later over the Cotentin Peninsula, sent the majority of the C-47s scrambling off course. It got real bad when we hit the Normandy coast.
The sky lit up and the flak came up and the machine gun tracers were coming up. You could hear the bullets hitting the side of the plane.
There was no problem getting the guys to jump. They wanted out. They wanted that green light to come on so they could get out of that damn thing.
I think everybody wanted it. You want to get out.
One of our planes was shot down and we lost, 12, 14 men. The company commander and the first sergeant. That was just before those guys even got on the ground.
Landing on the targeted drop zones behind Utah Beach would become almost impossible for the majority of the Easy Company men, such as Moose Heiliger, Joe Lesniewski, DeWitt Lowry, and Johnny Martin. My buddy Bill Wingate splashed down behind the beach in an area flooded by the Germans.
I landed in water over my head. I had on all of my equipment plus a leg bag. The Lord was with me, I tell you. I managed to get out of the trench.
Earl McClung landed in St. Mariglees, in a spot not too far from me. The exact location still familiar to him even after all these decades.
I landed on a little shrine right about a block from the church, down in a little hole there, and it was, like I say, dark. And when I landed on this roof, I thought I was going to probably break a leg coming off of that thing, but the roof slanted down. Then I was trying to get the hell out of town because there was a lot of bullets flying around there.
And when I landed, another guy landed very close to me, and I turned and I was still in my parachute, and I opened my mouth to say the password, and he yelled out, "Tipper!" We had known each other so well in all this training that we could recognize just by the way we moved. You see somebody, and he recognized me, and then I recognized him.
I was the last man out. I was the last man in the stick to make sure everybody got out. I was the sergeant at the time. And I landed just like that. We couldn't have been more than 300 or 400 feet off the ground.
I was there stared up in the sky for about a minute or so, and I saw a cow come over, and this ain't no joke. It's when I saw the cow, I said I was kind of happy. I figured it'd be no minefield,
The moon was going in and out behind the clouds, and I just thought about what you could see and then you couldn't see.
We didn't know where we was at, but we was there.
Before he jumped into the Normandy darkness, Ed Mauser witnessed Company Commander Lieutenant Thomas Meehan's plane, number 66, get hit and go down.
I saw the plane going down and looked like it was going to make a landing, and hit the ground, and it hit the hedgerow and exploded. And I lost 18 good friends of mine on that plane, and that every time I talk about it, it kind of hits me.
Meehan and 16 other members of Headquarters Company died in the crash. Good men, like Bill Evans, Richard Owen, Carl Riggs, Elmer Murray, and Ralph Weimer. They never fired one bullet in Normandy after all our intense training as paratroopers. Earl McClung and Don Malarkey visited the crash site several years ago.
He replaced Sobel in E Company, and I only knew the man when I saw him. I never spoke to him, but this is where they found the remains of his plane, and they found his dog tags here.
Normandy was the first taste of combat for the men in Easy Company. For some of my friends, it would be their one and only fight. Private Ed Tipper was seriously wounded a few days after D-Day in the battle for Carentan.
Our resistance was not very heavy. The Germans that were resisting us had one machine gun, we had three, and so we just moved ahead. And what happened was the Germans were one step ahead of us, so they had that Y intersection zeroed in with mortar fire. They knew that they could withdraw and we'd move forward into that intersection. And so I was in the doorway of a building I had cleared, and the mortar shell landed at my feet, and I got very badly wounded. Liebgott came running over and said, the mortar shell hit you. And so he risked his life to help me, but every one of us, that was just the normal behavior for our group. Everybody was capable of risking his life on an instant for anybody else. I had my right eye destroyed. That was what the worst of it. I had both legs broken. I had shrapnel in my right elbow and in my left elbow and my right knee. Either one of those could have caused me all kinds of problems later in life, and neither one did. I've lived a very active life. I skied well into my 80s. I played four-wall handball for 20 or 25 years, and I've always been extremely active. But when I was wounded, I thought my life was over. I thought, my God, I just won't be able to do anything. I won't be able to get a driver's license, and that was my reaction. And then I found out that all of that was just not true. I taught school for almost 35 years, and I don't know if that's a normal experience, but I did what I wanted to do. I'm satisfied that I did some good in the career that I took, and I never regretted it.
Most of the E Company men thought Tipper died as a result of his horrific wounds.
When I was in the hospital in Indianapolis, I went to visit Floyd Talbert's family. Floyd was still in, and they wrote a letter to him. He was still fighting. And he wrote back, he said, Ed Tipper visited you? That's crazy. I saw him killed. He said top of his head was blown off, and whoever's saying he's Ed Tipper is impersonating him, call the MPs and get that guy put in jail.
Normandy would also be the first time many of us, such as Bill Wingate, would be faced with the task of doing what we've been trained to do: kill Germans.
I think it was difficult in the sense that killing people isn't a normal thing. I think it was simple enough in the fact that I'd been training, and this person was interested in doing me the same way.
Normandy was also a place where, due to the logistics of the fight, we were not exactly encouraged to take prisoners. Same on the German side, I was told.
I figured, well, they'd probably do the same thing to us, so after we captured these Germans, what happened to them, I don't know. So if that's what they did it, but I didn't see it, though.
Walking the Normandy battlefield at Brecourt Manor, decades after the fight, brings back thoughts of being indestructible. We all thought that way. I know Don Malarkey did on D-Day.
So without doing any thinking at all, I ran out in the field because I could see a canvas pouch on this German side, and I immediately thought it was a holster. Well, I got out there alongside him. It was empty. But while I was kneeling down by him, Winters yelled at me. He was near the second gun. And he said, "There's Germans all over the place. Get the hell out of there."
Private Albert Blythe was portrayed in some circles as a shell-shocked soldier who lost his nerve in Normandy, then regained it in the fighting around Carentan. Blythe was seriously wounded by a sniper just days before we were pulled off the line. It was said he died in 1948 as a result of wounds. Yet in reality, Albert Blythe went on to fight in Korea, earning several medals. He also made a career out of the military, passing away in 1967.
He opened up with my mom pretty much, and she knew what happened, but she never told me. All she told me, she said, well, you know, one of these days when you're grown and I'm not here no more, you know, maybe you'll find out what happened and, you know, maybe what he went through. But she never told me. She just said the war really messed him up real bad, you know, which, you know, he drank a lot. He was a real heavy drinker, and that led to his death. And how I want my dad to be remembered, you know, that Al Blythe just did what he loved, and that was being a paratrooper.
After fighting in Normandy for more than a month, we were sent back to England in mid-July to regroup. That meant replacements for the 65 E Company men who were killed, wounded, or missing in France. Babe Heffron, Tito Mendoza, Tony Garcia, Les Heshy, and Don King joined us in Aldbourne.
I treated them just like us. They was new, they was replacements. Maybe somebody didn't, but I did.
Holland and Operation Market Garden was the next jump for all of us. But not for E Company man Phil Perugini, who broke his leg on the D-Day jump.
It was a Sunday afternoon, 12 o'clock. People were in church and that, and 13,000 troopers were jumping. And we jumped right in Zahn there, close to that church, and all at once the bells started ringing, and people come running out, and they looked up at the sky and seen all the umbrellas, and they were so happy. We got into the city there, and they got some beer and some food and hugs and kisses, and they were just so happy about it. So I knew what freedom was then.
Buck Taylor had also been wounded in Normandy, and he rejoined Easy Company prior to the jump into Holland. His biggest fear wasn't heading back into combat, but rather being assigned to another unit. Many E Company men escaped from hospitals just to make sure they got back to their friends in time for the next fight.
So I didn't want to be assigned to another unit, not knowing anybody, and especially going into combat with people you really didn't know well. You have to know all the fellows that are with you, know what they're going to do in a tight situation.
I think of one of the men, Forrest Guth, and Forrest, when he jumped in Holland, he had a malfunction in his parachute, so he comes down and he doesn't have time to pull his reserve. So he hits the ground with a thump and messes up his back and his legs, and gets shipped to a hospital in England. So his war is basically through. You know, if he wants to go home, he's got a green card home. And while he's in the hospital, he regains the feeling in his legs. And he's like, well, I'm going to go rejoin my unit. I'm going back to the fight. And examples of that type of determination are just amazing.
Well, this is the Wilhelmina Canal, and that is the bridge that the Germans blew as we were coming in. I happened to be the first scout and way out in front, so I was across the bridge, and there was some big trees directly across from us here, and I went up and got in amongst them, and just about the time I got there, the bridge blew.
Behind us is the location of the 2nd Battalion headquarters, and that became Dick Winter's office area at the time that he became executive officer of the 2nd Battalion.
We faced stiff German resistance in Operation Market Garden. After liberating Eindhoven, Robert van Klinken, a fellow Toccoa man, was killed in Neunen, Holland on September 20th. Bill Dukeman got it on the island in Holland on October 5th. One of our medics, Al Mampry, was wounded coming to the aid of Lieutenant Robert Brewer in Neunen.
He was shot through the neck, and I tried to get plasma. I mixed up bottles to get plasma and tried to find a vein that would accept the needle. And then I heard a crack, and they broke the bottle. Well, then meanwhile, the medic that should have been out there came out there, and he got clipped in the heel. And then the dirt started kicking up around me. And so I lie down next to next to Brewer, and I said in my best bedside manner, "Are you dead?" And but he answered, so I assumed he wasn't dead. And he said, "No, but I know why not. I don't know why I'm not dead." And I said, "Well, I'll stay with you."
He was a new second lieutenant, new to the company. Nobody knew him very well, but he was out in front leading them across this open area, and a shot rang out from the buildings. He went down, and Stroll was, he's my mortarman, and he was on my left side. He ran over and looked at him, and I ran up. I wasn't too far behind. I looked at him, he was bleeding out of the neck, and I said, "Oh, he's finished. We got to keep moving." And you know, I met him 20 years later in Washington, and we joked about this. He heard me say that.
And this is the second time I've been in these woods, in this area. It brings back a lot of memories.
The Germans' offensive in the Ardennes forest in mid-December of 1944 led Easy Company and men such as Frank Sobolewski to Bastogne, Belgium, where on December 18th, one of our older guys, Ed Mauser, celebrated his 28th birthday.
We didn't have the right equipment, not very good winter equipment. Didn't have much ammunition, just a few rounds and a clips and that. But they said, "That stuff will pick up and you'll get it."
So we started up the Bastogne-Foy Highway, and the first thing we ran into were Americans from the 106th Division. And it was unbelievable to us to see them coming at us with no weapons, half of them didn't have overcoats, helmets, some were bandaged. I don't know, I liken it to almost Washington at Valley Forge, that kind of a picture.
Well, we got all the way to Bastogne, and these Americans that were retreating there, we asked them for their ammo and some of their clothing and that, and some would give it, some wouldn't. I don't know why they wouldn't give it to us. So then we got into Bastogne, in the forest there, and it was the 16th that we traveled, and about the 18th, we got surrounded. And I was thinking about, you know what, that's my birthday, December 18th. And I think that's when we got surrounded.
It was down on our hands and knees, and the goddamn shells kept coming in. It was really bad. It's terrifying, really.
A couple of them hitting the trees, and Garnier was only 30 feet away from me, and he went down. So I ran over to him, and I could see he was in bad shape. But not much you can do in a situation like that. Hope for the best.
The weather was horrible. Snowing and damp and cold, and planes couldn't fly or none of that. We had to sleep on the ground on top of snow. Well, sometimes we'd cut some branches down and laid them down and stood on guard duty that way. But the fellows that were in there before us, they built, boy, I'll tell you, they dug some good foxholes. They were so good that you could get three of us into a foxhole. And that's how we kept warm.
I have no recollection at any point in time of ever even suspecting that I wouldn't go home from the war. I don't know why. It just simply never occurred to me.
Paul Rogers, wounded in Holland during our 73 days of action at Market Garden, rejoined us, and the surrounded 101st Airborne just in time for the Battle of the Bulge. The fight around Bastogne that winter forever defined the men of the 101st in the history books.
I could have got out of the Army then if I'd probably wanted. No, I wanted to see it through.
Nobody wins medals. No bands playing. No singing a national anthem. You do what you had to do.
I think the stories had been bottled for so long, and just even lately, there's a new emphasis on it's okay to talk for combat veterans. It's okay to tell your stories. People do want to hear them. They do want to listen.
Hank Zimmerman and Herb Suerth joined Easy in Mormelon, France, just prior to our leaving in trucks for Bastogne. They were 2 of 226 men to join the company as replacements during the war. E-Company officers like Ed Shames had no issues with accepting new men like Seworth.
You know, there's been a lot of controversy about that, or people have said that the replacements weren't well received and they were hazed and all that. And I really don't remember any of that. Now, I don't know why. I happened to bunk next to McClung, which I thought was, I didn't know, but it was really a blessing in disguise because, you know, Mac was one of the respected guys in the outfit. We had no idea where we were going or what was going to happen. But all the guys around me were very calm. Yeah, they were worrying about their ammunition and their grenades and all these things. And they had that, I guess you might call it the hardness of that you develop after a while and getting thrown into someplace or into combat. They were ready for it.
Just thinking about it makes it a whole lot colder than what it is today.
Sure does.
But I'll tell you one thing. I had some good soldiers right alongside of me.
You had some cold ones too.
Yeah.
We had summer uniforms on, the same uniforms that we'd fought with in Normandy. We had inadequate ammunition, inadequate everything. And a couple days after we arrived here, why, it snowed every day. Every day was below freezing, extremely cold nights. And how you survived under that, I don't know.
It was in these very same woods outside of the village of Foy where 2 of the most popular men in Easy, Skip Muck and Alex Pencala, were killed when a shell hit their foxhole. Hard for any of us to forget that day, or the over 30 days guys like me and medic Ralph Spina spent freezing and being shot at in Belgium that winter.
And somehow or other, an artillery shell penetrated through the timber and landed right on a foxhole occupied by Skip and Alex Pencala. Killed them both instantly.
7 days earlier, Wild Bill Garnier and Joe Toy were also hit and lost legs. 2 more Toccoa men and close friends of Don Malarkey gone from the fight.
I had got to my foxhole when the heavy artillery fire hit, and then I heard a scream, and I jumped up out of the foxhole, and the shelling had subsided a little bit, and I could see Joe Toy out real badly hit, and Garnier running out to help him. And as Garnier went running out, then he got hit just as bad as Joe.
It was rather cold-hearted, I guess. You weren't surprised. We all knew it could come any time to us. And there was no weeping or anything like that.
Pat Christensen, one of the men of Easy Company, I was fortunate to get a hold of his journals in the researching process, and he talks about how the exact experience of war is impossible to convey, even by those who did the fighting. And Pat was a rare combination of, he could write things in his journal, and then he also drew pictures. He was sort of the resident artist of Easy Company. What he saw, he drew. But even then, he confessed the inadequacy of words and pictures to really talk about what was happening.
Over a period of time after I was here during the war, I've often thought about this, especially in the wintertime when it snows back in Virginia. And I think about this area.
Revisiting places like the Bois-Jacques Woods outside of Foy, Belgium, where Toccoa man Frank Millet was killed by a sniper in the village. Or the rebuilt city of Haguenau, France, where easy men such as Norman Nitsky and Don Bond saw their first and last offensive action of the war. Brings into perspective the incredible experience we were part of. Fellow soldiers like Shifty Powers and Earl McClung are able to recall their time in locations such as Haguenau and the Ardennes forest like it was yesterday. Their travels to Hitler's Eagle's Nest high above Berchtesgaden in the Bavarian Alps. which soldiers such as Don Moon and Paul Lamoureux helped to capture, are as vivid today as they were in 1945.
Well, Hitler's home was completely obliterated. There was nothing left of that. And as far as I was concerned, they just, we got into Birch's Garden, and they said the road was blown out, so they couldn't go up there. And I said, hell, I've climbed over a few rocks in my life, so I went on up. I was a first scout, and that was my job.
The liberation of the concentration camp at Landsberg in Germany certainly brought the reason for the war home to all of us in Easy. I know it did for replacements Roy Gates, Eugene Gilmore, and Patrick O'Keefe, who saw firsthand what the Nazis were capable of. Contrast that with the beauty of Zell am See, Austria, where we in Easy saw the war end.
It's amazing to me that way back then when somebody was talking about destiny and an appointment with destiny, and we all kind of passed it off, and how it all kind of came true.
After the war, the men of Easy Company mostly went our separate ways. We got married and raised families. We returned to work, getting on with our lives after being part of the most horrific and heroic experience the world had ever witnessed. Some of us had nightmares, some drank away the memories, some died from other causes. But we all just got on with life.
I just kind of forgot about it. I didn't dwell on it. I went to bed. It didn't bother me. I went to sleep. I was a little older than some of them, but I didn't dwell on anything. I think I've always believed when my time come, I would die, no matter where. I still believe it.
The experience of World War II was something I and the other 374 veterans who made up Easy Company during the war mostly tried to forget. But being a part of that company was, at the same time, the proudest moment of our lives and would be our greatest accomplishment. It wasn't so much that we jumped into Normandy or fought in Holland or held the Germans off in the Battle of the Bulge or spent 337 days in combat. It was that we found that we could trust and depend on one another to keep each other alive. Our shared experiences were unequaled and didn't need to be talked about after the war. Our family members and friends could never share this bond. They didn't see what we saw or do what we did. When the men of Easy gather for reunions, which we've done pretty much annually since 1947, the talk isn't so much about Captain Sobel, or Toccoa, or even combat in Europe, but rather about the good times we shared during the war. Often the names of those paratroopers who are no longer with us come up. Men such as Dick Winters, Lewis Nixon, Walter Gordon, Ron Spears, George Luz, and Eugene Doc Rowe. In recent years, that list has grown dramatically. There are spots at the table, now occupied by sons, daughters, or grandchildren, all still part of the Easy Company family.
I didn't really firsthand sit down and say, Papa, tell me some stories about the war. My mom, my aunts and uncles said that anytime he would talk about it, it was always about the happy times, the good times, his buddies, things like that.
You know, I was pretty fortunate because as a son, you know, he would share them with a son where he wouldn't share them with a daughter. So, and the story that I always remember the most was the muck and Pincala, you know, getting killed in Bastogne. So that was a story that I always remembered. When they get together once a year at these events, it's as if it's 65 years ago. They're kids again, and they think like kids, and there's an extra little spring in their step, and it's really cool to witness that.
You see him and you think about something that happened. No. A lot of it's funny and a lot of it's not funny.
We must like each other because we come. The third platoon was pretty close.
Broadband I didn't see for 66 years. I just met him now, so And I didn't even recognize him. I mean, I don't think he recognized me until he seen my name or something like that, and I saw his name in that.
The boys were part of the family to me. My boys were.
As we all say, there were 1,000 other good rifle companies like ours in the ETO, or we would have never won the war. But at the same time, we're very, very proud. And it's been fun.
See, the Germans were over there. We were over here.
Shifty, he had cancer at the end, and he had good days and bad days, in his words. And so when he'd call, I'd say, well, you know, Shifty, what kind of day are you having today? And he'd say, oh, I'm having a good day, I'm having a bad day. I said, you know, Shifty, tell me about a good day for you. What does a good day look like? And he said, well, you know, the thing I just love to do is I love to stand on my front porch. I love to shoot rifles. He had an M1 rifle that some guys had given him, and he would just, you know, just stand on his front porch and shoot these guns, just target practice. And yeah, he lived in a remote area. He could do that. I said, so Shifty, you know, tell me what does a bad day look like for you? And he said, well, you know, if I'm having a hard day, I pretty much just sit in my recliner and you know, I like to listen to books on tape. I said, well, you know, what are some of your favorite books? And he said, well, I like Westerns. I really like Louis L'Amour. And, well, he said, I like the Bible. And I thought, you know, that's a pretty good image of a man who he enjoys shooting guns off his porch and listening to the Bible.
For we who are alive and remain, and for those Easy Company brothers who've passed on, a gun and a Bible serve as a fitting visual of our shared experiences in World War II, a bond that can never be broken, in life or in death.